So, a few clips from Season 2 of Andor were released a few days ago, and one clip is strongly hypothesized to be showing the Ghorman Massacre, which was a major event in the creation of the Rebel Alliance, and something we haven't seen a ton of yet in canon. So I figured today we could take a look at what the Ghorman Massacre is, and namely what leads up to it, and discuss what this could mean for Andor Season 2. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So the Ghorman Massacre is one of the major events that led to the creation of the Rebel Alliance. It saw peaceful protests on the planet Ghorman responded to by the Empire with force, as Imperial forces massacred, quote, hundreds to thousands of peaceful protesters on the world. It's one of the events that led Mon Mothma to denounce the Imperial Senate and the Emperor himself, and leave to formally become part of the Rebel Alliance. It turned what was a scattered group of rebel cells into one organized faction, and would ultimately snowball into the battles of Scarif and Yavin that would lead the Empire towards its doom a few years later at the Battle of Andor. So the Ghorman Massacre was really, really impactful, but today let's discuss sort of what it was and what led up to it. So to understand this, we have to go all the way back to the Clone Wars. Now, Ghorman is a planet in the CERN sector and was represented in the Republic Senate by Senator Fang Zar, who was, crucially, in the final days of the Clone Wars, one of the senators to sign the Delegation of 2000, a sort of Senate declaration that the then Chancellor should relinquish some of his emergency powers back to the Senate. However, after the end of the Clone Wars, the declaration of Order 66, and the extermination of the Jedi, basically the day after, Palpatine had ordered the arrest of several senators that had signed that delegation, including Senator Fang Zar, who was arrested for supposedly colluding with the Jedi. This already left kind of a sour taste in the mouths of the people of Ghorman, who had just seen their senator arrested by the newly created Empire. But this would just be the beginning of the issues, because like Ryloth, Ghorman quickly found itself in a more rebellious position, with their people opting instead to take up arms against Imperial occupiers in a resistance movement called the Ghorman Front, which would fight a guerrilla war against the Empire from the very early days of the Empire all the way up to the rise of the Rebel Alliance. Now, this guerrilla effort was hit or miss, and sometimes they'd be very effective, and other times they'd have long periods of quiet, but long story short is they were a thorn in the side of the Empire. Now, this was generally ignored by Imperial officials for many years, but when we get to about 5 BBY, around the time of the first season of Andor, there are active debates in the Senate about what to do about the Ghorman problem. The Ghorman Front is becoming a bigger issue for operations on that world, and the Empire needs to figure out what the proper solution was. Now, we know that the initial plans that were put into place were the blockade of Ghorman, an attempt to sort of starve this rebel faction out and force the people of Ghorman to turn on members of the Ghorman Front. Now, we don't know how effective that was, because that's about where Andor Season 1 leaves off, but it's likely that was less than effective and would instead result in growing peaceful protests that culminate in the Ghorman Massacre in 2 BBY, 2 years before the Battle of Yavin. Now, the time immediately surrounding the Ghorman Massacre is a bit of a question mark. We don't know for sure how that massacre played out. It's likely been changed from its Legends description to something a little bit more grounded. The Legends description tended to be a little bit over the top. Regardless, the impact of the Ghorman Massacre remains the same. It's one of the key sparks that lead to the Rebel Alliance, and we actually see in Star Wars Rebels, Mon Mothma, having just left the Imperial Senate, basically stating openly that the reason she left was the Ghorman Massacre. And with the public declaration by a prominent Imperial senator like Mon Mothma, the sort of scattered groups that were making up the rebel elements at this time would slowly come together to form the Rebel Alliance, which would go on to fight in the Battle of Scarif and the Battle of Yavin, all the way through to the Battle of Andor, when they would formally transition into the New Republic. So this massacre once again snowballed into, eventually, the end of the Empire. If you'd like to learn more about some of the rebel factions that came together in the aftermath of the Ghorman Massacre to form the Rebel Alliance, I'll leave a link up here to a video on one of those factions. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments whether you think this is actually what we're going to see in Andor Season 2. It seems pretty sort of significant, and it would be a good place to show something like the Ghorman Massacre, but do you think that's what we're seeing in these very early sort of scenes that were released last week, or do you think we're looking at something entirely different? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars or anywhere else in science fiction, you can let me know down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.